Well, good afternoon, y'all. Welcome to another Lonely Oak wine review. I'm Rick. I'll be diving into the 2018 Viognier from McPherson Cellars today as we continue my dive into the Texas wine country, try to familiarize myself with it. So this is a fantastic example of Viognier. This grape finds its roots in the Rhone Valley of France, where it tends to be a little bit warmer, so this does very well in warm climates, places like California, Eastern Washington, as well as Texas here. So this is no exception to that. This one is a very fine example of Viognier. With this grape, you tend to get quite a bit of body out of it. You know, it's somewhat Chardonnistic in a sense, in terms of the weight that it carries, and even in color. It tends to have a pretty decent hue to it, which is attributed to the natural colors of that grape itself. So this one here, we'll go ahead and get her poured out. I did want to touch on, it is a twist top. A lot of people have kind of some misjudgments and some bad ideas about twist tops, that's some kind of a mark towards the quality of the wine. That is not the case. A traditionalist such as myself, you know, you always like to pull a cork. The showmanship of it is a little more fun. But in terms of the integrity of the wine, nothing is going to seal off that wine better than a twist cap. So that allows for no oxygen saturation, and quite often they will actually back that up with an inert gas such as argon or nitrogen in order to remove all oxygen from that bottle, and oxygen being essentially one of the worst enemies of fresh wine. That's kind of the ideal way to store it. So it's not as much fun necessarily, but it does not mark the quality in any way, shape, or form. So diving in, as usual with any tasting, you're going to go based off what you see. And what we see here is that traditional, beautiful, deep yellow hue of Viognier. Kind of has a clear rim around the edges there, and what's cool about that is a lot of times that color is derived from the cooperage. So say an oak barrel often imparts quite a bit of color, and then also any kind of skin contact. So this one here is 100% stainless steel and absolutely no skin contact. So all the color you're seeing here is that natural grape color, and it is beautiful to say the least. As we dive in on the nose, you know, this one's pretty cold. When I initially served it, it was as well, so it wasn't a big booming aroma kind of grape, but it's there. Traditionally, you tend to pull kind of peach and honeysuckle notes off of it. This one kind of comes off a little bit nuttier to me. You definitely get a hint of that peach fruit, but yeah, it was not too overwhelming. And I've actually gotten in some, particularly in Washington State, for example, I tend to pick out some of the more savory examples, a little bit of caramel notes, which is always impressive. It usually comes in off the finish. It's not really prominent, but some of the sweeter versions you tend to pick up some of that, and it's probably due to that residual sugar. We'll go ahead and dive in on the palate here. Again, quite a bit of nuttiness, particularly towards that finish. Slight peach on that. There's another bright fruit in there that I can't quite nail down. But again, that phenomenal weight that you get from Viognier. Yeah, just an outstanding bit of acidity, very crisp on this, and that's quite a bit attributed to that stainless steel. That's going to preserve a lot of that tart acidity to it. Again, I mentioned it's not booming with the aroma, but as these things start to warm up, with wine in general, the warmer it is, well, I mean with liquid in general, the warmer it is, those more volatile compounds begin to off-gas, and that's what you're smelling. So as we move along, I'm sure that'll kind of develop its character, but this is another one that absolutely found itself with food. I paired it with, and I'll kind of go over this in a minute, but it went from fairly subtle, certainly a subtle complexity there. So it's not to say that it was muted or that anything was lacking, but kind of like the Vermentino I did a few days ago, it really didn't find its shine until I paired it with food. And this one, being dry to the bone, I kind of went towards that fish route. Ended up going with it was kind of a knee-jerk, a little bit of shooting from the hip on this one, but I ended up pairing with a salmon fillet. What I did with that salmon fillet is I almond crusted it with some shaved almond, threw my own little spice blend on there, and then pan-seared it in sesame oil. So I was kind of going for a little bit of an Asian flavor on it. Just thought it'd be kind of a fun route to do and test it out, and sure enough, it worked out. Otherwise, I wouldn't be mentioning it. So, I mean, not only did it work out, it went from a respectable, delicious wine to absolutely phenomenal. The entire combination was out of this world. I was completely blown away. I'd never suggested in the past, you know, in my time in restaurants, I'd never paired this kind of a white with a salmon fillet. I'd go towards Pinot Noir or some crisper whites. So this one absolutely did not disappoint. The prominent fishiness of the salmon was absolutely elevated in a way to where it didn't like intensify the fishiness. It wasn't overwhelming and unpleasant, but it complemented it very, very well. The acidity cut through the oil of that fish. You know, it's a pretty meaty fish, so that went right through it, and particularly that nutty note that was somewhat subtle at the beginning just was out of this world with that almond. I could not have been happier. So I was very, very pleased. It was incredibly stunning, and it just soared. I mean, that salmon flavor, I think the best way to describe it, I was somewhat hesitant trying to find a word, but I think blooming. It literally just, I mean, it just expressed itself so wonderfully. So if you ever have the chance, definitely give that a shot with a nice cut of salmon and a little bit of spices. By the way, with any of my recipes or pairings, feel free to message me and ask for some details. I'm somewhat of an improvisational cook, so in terms of the exact quantities on the spice blends, you know, I tend to pick out my spices to start, and then I'll just kind of, you know, I'm just throwing in, smelling, tasting, working it as I go. But at least I can give you some kind of a framework on how I went about it, as well as any of these reviews, excuse me, in text format. I'd be happy to put that out there as well. Hopefully pretty soon I'll have those posted up somewhere. And then we also just got our YouTube channel going, so check us out at Lonely Oak Wine on YouTube. So pretty much the handles straight across all your social media platforms. We'll see if we can even get some TikTok content out there. I'll hopefully enlist the help of my young brother, as that's, I don't know, I guess I'm a little too old for TikTok, but we'll figure it out. So anyway, you can't talk about McPherson Cellars without giving a tip of the hat to the McPherson family. If Texas had royalty in terms of wine, the McPhersons have got to be at the top of it. So while this is Kim McPherson, this is his project here. His father, Dr. Clint McPherson, or Doc McPherson, along with Rob Reed, back in the early 70s, possibly late 60s. Those gentlemen were at Texas Tech. They were quietly laying the groundwork for what is now the vibrant and booming Texas wine industry. So while they were there, they established Llano Estacado Winery right out of Lubbock. So for those that aren't familiar with Texas geography and the High Plains AVA that I've mentioned a couple times, so Lubbock is up towards that panhandle. So just as that corner meets the panhandle of Texas, you're looking at Lubbock right around there. And the Llano Estacado is actually a land formation, so it's one of the largest mesa or tabletop landscapes in North America. So it actually ranges from about 5,000 feet down to 3,000 feet, and almost uniformly descends about 10 feet per square mile across that distance. So it goes from eastern New Mexico down through the western part of the panhandle. Lubbock is right around the center of it, and then Amarillo kind of marks that northern edge. But you've got those great elevations from 3,000 to 5,000 feet, and as I've mentioned before, those nice hot days with those cool nights. So that drives the ripening during the day and then preserves that acid at night. So it's an ideal climate. And Doc and Rob Reed were out there back in the 70s while California was getting all its attention to start. These guys, like I said, were kind of quietly laying that groundwork there. and getting things going. Establishing that Llano Estacado winery, which was one of, I don't believe it was the first, but it was absolutely one of the very first pre or post-prohibition wineries in the state of Texas. As I mentioned before, prohibition largely wiped out our wine industry that was established quite a time before that, with Spanish missions and such like that. So absolute, you know, as I said, a tip of the hat to those guys in the McPherson family. And Kim here, his oldest son, is carrying on the tradition. Admittedly, I've yet to try his father's work. I haven't had any Llano Estacado, but a little teaser, maybe we've got some coming up here pretty soon, so stay tuned for that. But as a first kind of debut into the McPherson style of doing things, this was absolutely living up to the hype. This was unbelievable. A little background on Mr. Kim McPherson. He was also a Texas Tech alumni, but he actually honed his viticultural skills at the renowned UC Davis there in California. So for those of you that don't know, that is one of the premier viticultural universities and programs in not only the country, but at this point in the world. So a lot of good work being done out there, a lot of folks learning their trade and producing some phenomenal juice, and you can find them all across the great country and in the world as well. So that winemaking prowess from UC Davis is certainly evident in this Viognier. I'm gonna quit talking for a second and dive back in. It's getting warm. We gotta enjoy it while it's there. As I said, as these things warm up, it just develops into its own even more. And yeah, so I classify it as a foodie, even a porch pounder. This thing does perfectly fine on its own, but if you really want it to express its true nature, I think putting that with some food, and for example, what I put forth was outstanding. So if you'd like more details on that, again, message me. So here with the McPherson legend continues, as well as the legend of the High Plains AVA there, and for an $18 price point, you are not going to be disappointed. I've mentioned it before, and I'll keep saying it. Now's the time to grab your Texas wine, because eventually it's going to be big. There's just no way around it. The quality that I've come across just diving through $15 to $20 bottles and just what's on the shelf, and they're widely available as well here, particularly in the state of Texas. Distribution elsewhere is kind of tough, so give me a shout. I'll do what I can to try to send some of my folks elsewhere some bottles, but if you have the resources, check out Texas wine, because it absolutely, honestly, has yet to disappoint. So keep checking in with us. I'm going to keep putting out. We've got a couple more Texas wines to go, I believe, before we start diving into our internationals. But I've got some Italian coming up. I've got a New Zealand that I'm excited about, and some French. And yeah, we're just going to keep exploring the world of wine, and we'll try to get some special stuff in here, and hopefully you guys enjoy it. Otherwise, stay safe. Keep your faces covered out there. Speaking of which, for those that aren't aware, I do offer private tastings, so we're getting that going. We are taking certain precautions for COVID, so don't hesitate to reach out. If you're not comfortable with a home tasting, we can find some ways. So the way it works is I generally line up a number of bottles, about 6 bottles for a group of 10 or less, and it's kind of like how I run these reviews. It's a little informal. I'm just kind of chit-chatting about the wine. I am a snob-free kind of guy. As you can see, I try to, it's a pinky down affair. I don't agree with putting down other wines. You taste what you taste, and you enjoy what you enjoy. So please keep that going. That's one thing I appreciate about the Texas wine culture, is it's a little more lowbrow, and it's all about the juice. So keep drinking out there, and like I said, stay safe, stay happy, and cheers.